Welcome to the Curiosity Solution. I'm your host, Beverly Beal. Join us as we explore the science of curiosity, share stories of people who've used curiosity to improve their lives, and maybe inspire some aha moments along the way. Welcome to the latest episode of the Curiosity Solution. This guest, I guess today is Perry, and it's Rickard, right?
Correct. Yeah. It sounds different than it's spelled.
Well, I am a Star Trek person, and so the first, anytime I see that, ARD, the first thing that comes to mind is Picard, because
Oh, very cool. I wish I could relate. I haven't seen Star Trek, so I'll just have to take your word for it.
All right, young lady, we've got some education to go on down here, but that's fine. There's lots of value in exploring some of the older genres and such. So, but anyway, that is not why we're here to discuss, the merits of Star Trek. That would be another person that I actually have in mind now. So, thank you. Perry and I met when she was brought to my attention from another friend. Because as a feng shui consultant, I often enjoy working with professional organizers, since clutter is one of those things that most people think about with feng shui, that it's bad feng shui, and then I have to go and explain that it's the pile that's not the problem, it's the stagnation of the pile. How long that pile stays in place indicates either an unwillingness to face whatever emotions are stuck in that pile, or just the, again, unwillingness to carve out the time it would take for the project to happen. And therefore it ends up compiling and compounding the guilt, the stress, the, anxiety of it. And Perry is the owner of Bluebird Organizing. So let's talk a little bit more about, how did you get involved with this? Because most people don't grow up to say, I want to be an organizer someday.
Yeah, I can't say I did either, in part because I had never heard of a professional organizer before, but it kind of got implanted in my brain because I'm one of 5 kids and we moved over 10 times just within the Austin area. And sometimes we'd be downsizing, sometimes all 4 girls would be sharing one bathroom. There was always some sort of organizing, decluttering experience going on in our household, and I loved it. And I thought it was really fun. And my mom started noticing that I had gifts and strengths, one that not everyone has, and that also these gifts and strengths brought me joy. And most people are not excited about looking at a bunch of boxes and thinking how they can unpack them into a space. And so that kind of stayed in my brain for a long time. And then I went and did a bunch of other things. I majored in creative writing and I was a freelance writer. And it all kind of hit a point when I got tired of staring at a screen and I was looking to get more involved in people's lives and also get more involved in my own life. I wanted to really take authority of my life. And I felt like one of the best ways to do that was to start a business. And so I was like, what am I going to do? I have no idea. And I was living in Hawaii at the time because you can freelance write from pretty much anywhere. And I just had this moment where my thought about what my mom said. And since we're talking about curiosity, I was just curious. I was, would someone pay me to do this gift for them? And
Yes,
I
we
got on
would.
my little, I got on my little bike and I went and found a bike shop that was really messy. And I told them what I could do for them, how I could help. And I asked if they'd be willing to pay me, and they said yes. And I thought to myself, no way. And I said, I'll be back tomorrow. And I started helping people relocate from California to Hawaii. And then after a couple months of doing that in Hawaii, I moved back to Austin just because it's much bigger and there's a better, growth track here than there is in little island town Hawaii. But that's how I got into it. And honestly, since I've gotten started, I've kind of created what it means for me over time. And able to look back, I've realized it's been the perfect job for me. And I'm so, so happy and I love it.
So when did you when was this first client? What year was that?
2023. But
Okay.
I feel like I officially launched as a real business, whatever that means, February of 2024. So I
Okay.
just celebrated my 1 year business anniversary in Austin last month.
That's fantastic. Now, of course, there are going to be a lot of people who are watching this going, and why did you leave Hawaii? But you really answered the question because you're right. It's hard to carve out enough of anything in a very small pool, and organizing like feng shui. Once you do it, and once you make that investment, and you get things, get the machine rolling, you don't have to redo it on a
Yeah,
frequent basis. And so,
yeah,
yeah, you always are looking for the next word of mouth person.
yeah,
Is that how you've been able to build your business? Because it sounds like that's what got you from Hawaii to here was the word of mouth, enough Californians coming in, and then you
yeah.
simply transplanted. Is that still how things are going for you?
I would say that word of mouth is definitely part of it, but I would say my number one resource is networking. I
Okay.
do a lot of networking that is starting to change pace because I can only manage so many relationships at one time, and
Mhm.
I don't want to make a connection if I'm not able to reciprocate, the relationship. And so I'm starting to now transition into more social media and podcast advertising actually. So this is funny that I'm investing in that and now doing my first podcast. So it's funny how the universe works that way. But I'm just trying to find ways to where it's not just me and my time doing all the outreach because it's getting a little bit tiring.
When I first left the Dallas area to move to Austin, um, I had been in Dallas for 16 years. I got my start with the feng shui and the energy work and space clearing and all the things that I do. And, still have clients after 10, whole 9 years, 9 years of being in Austin. I still get so many referrals to new clients in Dallas because, again, when you find somebody that really works well
Yeah.
for what your needs are, you just want to share. And so, um, but yeah, it is hard because I almost burned myself out trying to do the whole networking routine. And so I, like you, became curious about, well, how can I maximize my time and my treasure, because some networking can get expensive. Um,
Yeah.
I personally found that getting deep into a couple of organizations by being on committees or heading up committees or being on the board, that's actually worked most effectively for me. How have you found
Mhm.
it? What have you found so far that has been maximizing your
Yeah.
time?
I would say that anytime I can create some sort of routine, it's very helpful for
Mm.
me. So when the networking events are happening at the same time in the same place with the same people, it's much easier for me to plug into those. Whereas whenever sometimes it's second Thursday and sometimes it's third Monday and they're at all these different places and who knows who's going to come, I just don't have the kind of that doesn't work great for me. It's
Yeah.
a little
Yep.
stressful. And I like to plan all my clients in advance so that I have planned when I go shopping for them and I have planned when I take their donations for them. And so when the networking gets all switched around, my client facing duties are also kind of get into a jumbled mess. And so
Yeah.
the routine is what works best for me. And also really trusting my gut and trusting that there are people out there who I can feel good around who are equally as business, growth minded as I am. And it doesn't have to just be a bunch of people that I don't really like that much. Maybe that's rude of me to say. I didn't really think too much about it before I said it, but
Well, you're not naming
yeah.
any organizations, so you're not throwing anybody under the bus. But I think that is a very key thing. You always, because you and I both end up in people's homes. We need
Mhm.
to feel as comfortable with them as they feel comfortable with us, because without that trust and that compatibility, we're not going to be able to give the service that they desire, and they're not going to feel
Mhm.
comfortable really opening up about, oh, okay, well, this system, yeah, that's fine,
Mhm.
but it really isn't.
Mhm.
It really isn't. I had, in fact, what was interesting, my my initial foray into the world of organizing was just trying to handle all of the school paperwork that was coming home when our kids were little. And my
Mm.
mother-in-law had just come for a visit as the organizer was finishing things up, and I wrote her the check. I mean, Perry, it was $60. I
Okay.
paid her 60 whole dollars to help me set up as simple of a thing, just file, like a bunch of files that would live on
Okay.
the countertop, so I could just put things in
Yeah.
there and know. And it wasn't even really a system that was going to work well for me, but it was done. It was, it was like, okay, it has a home. Am I ever
Mhm.
going to visit that home? Probably not. Um, I did sort of. And I just remember my mother-in-law, God bless her soul, um, she was horrified
Mm.
that I had to pay somebody to even just do that little thing. And I just burst into tears because I was so overwhelmed. But she, again, she was retired. She was had been a store manager or district manager for quite a few different retail companies. But she also never knew that people would pay me to organize them, and so that was her retirement job. So it is a skill set, it is a mindset, and it's a wonderful thing when you can help people through really some very difficult times in their life.
Totally.
Um, so are you still doing the relocation services?
I do, and there's actually a couple corporations who find me just through Google, and I help their employees relocate. I like
Okay.
that experience. I wouldn't say it's my number one thing. I mostly helped women who are recently divorced kind of decide what they want to keep from their previous however many years and what they want to move forward and get them settled into a new space that feels good for them, but also helping people move into senior living or families who are just unsure how to manage all the new items that are coming into their house year after year after year, and more so like hour after hour after hour. And so the relocation is part of it, but it's more, that's not something I market to directly. It just kind of comes when it comes.
What's the part that you said you enjoy the senior living, and helping women, after divorce. Is there a perfect client that if
Mm.
you could just write out the recipe that would make up the majority of your business, what would that client look like?
I would say the first and most important thing is just someone who's willing to be vulnerable.
Mm.
I think organizing is a success, exactly like what you're saying, when someone is willing to talk about their lifestyle and how they relate to their space and really be, just intimate and vulnerable with me as we declutter stuff. It can make the process a lot easier, and there can actually be kind of a cathartic experience to it versus it just being guarded and forced and really difficult. And so vulnerability is number one. I do. It's not a women only customer base by any means, but I would say I enjoy working with women a lot, just because I feel like I can relate to that experience better than I can to a man, just by the nature that I am a woman myself. And I think part of it too is when I was 19, I got diagnosed with PTSD, and I know this is a whole different thing, but this is a big part of why I love organizing. And it, just brought me into a whole new world of shame and emotion and understanding of space. And so when people are going through a difficult time and they're trying to move forward, and that's why I like divorce so much, is because you're experiencing this identity shift and you're unsure what to do and how do you move forward. And I like being able to come in and do something tangible that you can see visually and kind of
Mhm.
notice you've gotten to move forward. But then I also get to relate to that big emotion aspect of things. And so, yeah, vulnerability, some sort of big emotion involved, people looking to move forward in their life. And yeah, they're usually probably over 50 or so, over 45. That's would be my ideal client.
So I'm going to circle back to the PTSD.
Mhm.
Without going into details about what caused that. Um, I got involved a lot, or informed a lot of how EMDR helped my
Mhm.
father deal with the PTSD from his experiences in World War II. And it was through that I was alerted to how the body responds like a month or so in advance of the actual event for him. Like for my father, I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and so the weather was always number one, priority. I mean, forget about every other thing on TV. If we missed that weather forecast, that was going to be a bad day. So we always had to know
Mhm.
what the weather was like. Um, and because my father's big battles were fought in April, and so like all throughout, scattered throughout the month of April, from the beginning of February until the beginning of May, we all pretty much just walked on eggshells.
Ah,
But there
mhm.
were other times when he would flare up, and if we were, and it, we, and he through his therapist was able to figure out that it was the weather patterns.
Mm.
If it was overcast just a certain way, it triggered everything all over again. Um, did you ever have any experiences with using EMDR to help you through the PTSD, or did you find something else that worked? Just in case there's anybody
Yeah,
listening that is like,
totally.
huh,
Well, first, there's no one answer, that's for sure.
yeah, it's true.
But I have tried EMDR. I didn't try it for very long because I got diagnosed when I was still kind of a dependent on my parents, and there
Mm,
was a bit of understanding of, what does therapy look like, and all of those kinds of things. And then I think as I've become more of an adult, which I guess I am an actual adult now that I think about it, but I've found that it's really lifestyle choices that are the most helpful for me, and really trusting my gut and structuring my schedule in a way to where I can always have processing time and not go too many days without having any time to myself. That's when things start to get a little bit too bad. But even just, I would say, even a really big thing is running, kind of finding that one thing that you can do by yourself that just makes you not only recenter, but feel really strong and confident. I think one of the most important things if you're recovering from PTSD is to find the thing that makes you feel empowered. Um, I think empowerment's the way you heal, because more often than not, if you're experiencing or diagnosed with PTSD, something has happened to you to make you feel like you had no power in the world. And so if you can find that thing or friend or group or show or music, whatever it is, that can make you feel like you are powerful and you can do something with your life, I would find that and I would do it as often as possible. So,
I love that you brought up running as a way to like really take your. I do that with this the gym that I belong to. I believe
mm,
one of the chains here in the, well, it's a, I think nationwide. It's called F45, and it's just 45 minutes of functional
yeah.
movement. And for me, that 45 minutes, it takes me out of my head and puts me squarely in my body.
Mhm.
And that has made such a big difference. I mean, it's even built my bone density back up, and all of that stuff. Because I'm obviously a lot older than you are. Uh, um, one of the things that I, just on a personal note here, I think the thing that has impressed me the most about you is the amount of
Oh,
wisdom in the combination of the youth that you have, and the ability to channel all of that in a way that is fun and fresh, and grounded is just remarkable. So that was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on this podcast, because I'm curious, how did you get to be this way at such a young age? I mean, it can't be the PTSD.
I don't know what it is. Well, I mean, I have ideas, but I think sometimes it, I don't know, because it's this balance of I know that I am not this way fully because I created myself to be this way. And I also know that I am this way in part because I made consistent choices to become the person I am today. And um, yeah, I don't know. I really appreciate that. That's very nice. And so that makes me feel good. And I think if I were to answer that question, how did I become this or whatever? I really think it is just consistent choices. And more than anything, it's being really curious about who you really are and then choosing experiences to actually gather real life data to figure that out and being okay with the fact that the experiences might not turn out quite as good as you would hope, but that the experience itself is worthwhile nonetheless. Because
Yeah.
it feels really nice to wake up and say, this is what I want, this is why I want it, and here's how I'm going to go do it. And then being able to have actually done it is pretty cool too. And then just to keep that cycle going. So
Yeah.
it's fun.
So do you have like a checklist that you do for every day, or is that, or at night? I mean, are you a brain dump person, or are you the, tell me how your process is for organizing yourself, because I think a lot of people could use
Yes.
that help too.
Yes. So I would say organizing myself is the same way I would tell someone to organize their life or their calendar is think about what are the necessary things I need to, one, keep myself alive. So let's say that's showering, I would hope, brushing your teeth, eating, and you really have to start there and making sure you're doing those things really well. I'm a really big proponent of actually, there's, I think, 168 hours in a week, writing down all the things you need to get done in a week and seeing if actually it's over the amount of time that you have in the week. Because if that's the case, then you can't really argue with time and you're going to have to take something out. That's a rabbit trail, but to go back. So I think about what are the necessary things I need to do every week, even going to the grocery store. And I actually put those in my calendar, knowing that they have to get done, because if you don't put in grocery store or working out or whatever those necessary things are to make you feel your best, it's so easy for those calendar slots to get filled up. And then you reach the end of the day and you go, oof. But I know that there's also people who put them in their calendar and they are, let things fill up over them. And that's okay too. But something that someone said to me recently, because I was getting asked to do a lot of morning networking events, which is when I run. And I looked at her and I said, missing my morning run is just not something I'd budge on. And she really clicked on that and said, how interesting, you won't budge on it. And I was like, I wonder if there's other things in my life I should really stop budging on. And so I think once you find those necessary things, knowing and being curious about what is my life going to look like once I stop budging on them. Because I think that's another big thing, and I'm getting all over the place here, but when you find those necessary tasks, it's kind of scary because your life's going to change a little bit. Maybe you'll stop going to this thing or whatever it is, but that doesn't mean it won't be replaced with something better. And I think that's important to think about too. And so trying to go back to the original question, writing down your necessary tasks, keeping those in your calendar, and being committed to making them happen and trusting that everything will still be okay. And then I would also say, once you find those necessary tasks, I don't know, just being curious all the time. There's so many ways I could answer this. I might let you ask another follow-up specific question so I don't get too derailed.
Well, it's not that we're being derailed as much as the organic flow is unveiling the fact that every day you are choosing yourself. And every day you are evaluating, is it's like, because oh no, I can't remember who the author, but there's a story of a very successful businessman who had a list of like 100 things on, and he always held it, held on to that. And if someone would ask him to do something, he'd pull his list out. And if it wasn't furthering one of the, any of those goals, it was an automatic no. And so it sounds to me like you've internalized that messaging without, pulling a list out. One of the challenges that I think, especially women more in my generation, and certainly some in your generation as well, is this pull to do things for other people, because if you don't, they may pull the love, affection, attention, support away. And I know that was certainly the subliminal message that I got growing up, and it's a, pardon my language here, but it's a bitch to undo that.
Yes.
And what happens is when you do start choosing yourself like you're doing, you do run the, not even the risk, but you certainly can shift the expectations of others. So like the woman who was saying, that you're not budging on your run. Don't you want to be a success in business? You need to come to this. And you're like, no, actually, I think I'm going to be successful without that. But hey, thanks.
Yeah.
When you're in the client's homes, have you ever experienced a client's really hard pushback on making a change that is so clear to you, but they're like, no, what? And then how do you get, and because I'm sure you have, and then how do you work around that?
Yes, I would say the first that I have experienced that. And one of the things I have to constantly remind myself of is I can only help someone so much. And so that is a burden that I've decided to kind of release from myself. Is just, I, I'm not a miracle worker. I can only meet someone as much as they're willing. And so I've actually gotten better at kind of gauging those people pre-signing up and suggesting that they work with a coach or a therapist prior to me coming in, because
Transformational coach here. Think about me.
exactly, because they need and it's not a bad thing. It's just that to make the most use of my time with them, they need to be ready. And if they're still clinging really tightly to that, that's just a metaphor of something that they're really still clinging very tightly to. It's so much deeper than that. And there's not really the right, and every once in a while I've had a breakthrough and it works out nicely, but that means the client was already ready. I have had times where, and it makes me sad, where I check in with the client maybe a week or 2 weeks afterwards and they're like, I'm feeling really burnt out still. And that's not common, but those are the clients where I've gotten better at gauging early on and saying, I think you should do this first and then we should work together. However, I've also gotten more confident in my own perspective on things, and being a bigger sense of authority and trusting that they are hiring me. And so I'm allowed to say, in a very nice, I'm not mean, nor do I ever want to be, but in a very nice way saying, hey, I think this is holding you back. What would it look like to just try? What would it look like to pick, 3, if there's 6 things they're really worried about, what would it look like to let 3 go and see how we feel, and maybe let the other 3 go in a week? Kind of give it some sort of options there. And I mean, yeah, every client is so different. There's not a one size fits all kind of approach to it, but I would say that is where I would start. Yeah.
I imagine that's a lot more challenging when you're helping an older couple downsize into like an independent living apartment or assisted living, because you're literally asking them, well, they have to leave such a huge chunk of their life behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when we helped my mother-in-law, who, again, thank goodness she was very organized. So when it was time for her to leave her condo in Houston to move to Austin so that we could help her through the last year and a half of her life, um, it was a pretty simple move. Just
Yeah.
shifted some things from her condo and moved it over here. The rest of it was like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Um, but that's not the case for a lot of people. How do
No.
you handle working with that population, um, who are now suddenly facing not just the physical loss of their items, but also facing the, physical diminishment of their
Yeah.
bodies?
I would say the number one thing I do with seniors is I just listen to them.
Mhm.
They just want to be heard, and I think they want to feel like they're continuing on, and that matters. I was really, really incredibly close with my grandparents. They grew up 15 minutes away from me my whole life, so I saw
Aw.
them 3 times a week. So dealing with seniors is so natural and normal to me. It doesn't feel like this other population or anything like that. It just feels like humans who have lived a very rich life who want to make sure that that's protected and respected. And so we just move a little bit slower. And I talk to them a lot about archiving. And so whether that's scanning their photos and making sure that all their grandkids have access to it, or making sure that there's photo albums of all the furniture that they've loved. There's even an app called Artifacts where you can attach voice recordings to pictures and things. And so people really love that. And oddly enough, at the same time, I I think that there's a lot of belief that seniors are very resistant. And I know that there
Mm.
are some out there. But to be honest with you, I've worked with the majority of seniors who have accepted where they're at in life and are just looking for some help because they don't have the energy levels to do it anymore. And if anything, they want the move to go as quickly as possible so that they can start their next chapter and enjoy the rest of their lives. And so I think as people helping seniors, we also have to bring that same kind of attitude in. If we're coming in and saying, oh no, this is so sad, this is so this is so that, they're going to mirror that. And I
Absolutely.
don't think that it's their job. I mean, this is they get to be the center of attention during this time. And so we have to make sure as family members, as loved ones, that we're coming together and we're supporting them and we're excited because I've seen a lot of families where the siblings have different beliefs on what should happen with mom and dad. And that's not helping the downsizing process at all. And so it's actually almost, similar to anything, it's all the emotions and the relationships that are affecting the physical space, even in a senior downsize. So it all goes circle back.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I think, again, like you said, thankfully, when my mother-in-law passed, my husband and his two siblings were all on the same page,
Oh,
and
good.
thank goodness that, because that, of course, those I've seen situations where it got. I mean, when my mom passed, my dad had gone 10 years prior, but when my mom passed, there were some tense moments when it was like, "Ooh, I don't know. I don't agree with how you're handling this," but, at the same time, it's being handled. I
Yeah.
also think you have a particular, advantage because of your age. You're that
Mhm.
granddaughter or the great-granddaughter
Yeah.
that, they're just like, "Oh, yay, a young person," because that was something that my mother-in-law really got tired of seeing was, I wanna get out of this place. Everybody here's old.
Mhm.
I'm tired of
Yeah,
the wrinkle.
it does work in my favor. I think it makes them feel like they're getting again to pass their stories on,
Yeah,
and the youthful energy feels good for them
yeah.
because to be honest, most of them are still youthful at heart. They really
Mhm.
are. They just want to play and pull a bunch of pranks and tell you the same story. I mean, I think sometimes, and maybe it's because I grew up with my grandparents, I don't know, but I feel sometimes that we overcomplicate the senior experience and we almost look at it as if it's something other than human, but it's really the most human, I think, because they don't have a filter. They're going to tell you how they feel, and sometimes that's not always for the best, but
Yeah, yeah,
but
no.
there's a lot of seniors I met, and have continued to work with who I find to just be so awesome and full of life. I mean, there was one couple, this is one of my favorite stories, where they had both lost their spouses. They met, fell in love. He was almost 90. She was over 80 or something around that. I mean, they're not, spring chickens. And I got to help them move in together so that they could move in together, and they already had a cruise planned.
Aw.
And so I just think that there's so much hope, and it's just beautiful. So I could just go on and
That's
on about that. Yeah.
See, I do. I think that is such a cool thing. When you can find people who continue to be active and are continuing to choose curiosity, because I do think that is how we stay young, no matter our
Mhm.
age. Um, but speaking of curiosity, one of the questions that I like to ask all of my guests is, how was curiosity treated when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think that probably not very well, because curiosity doesn't have a required outcome. It's
Mm,
just, you just go in with no expectations. And I definitely grew up in a very, we go in and we are excellent and we are high performers and we are competitive. And with curiosity, that's almost entirely not the point. If you make that the point, you stop being curious and you start being performative. And so, yeah, it wasn't treated great, I don't think. But it
So how did
probably isn't for most people.
Well, yeah, no, I think you really succinctly tied that together because, again, for me, I'll just say that when I was a child, it was, yeah, here's some books. Oh, but you don't have time to read anymore because we need you to go do these chores.
Mhm.
And so I would try to expand and explore, and it was like, okay, well, that's fine, but you have to do that after everything else is done. And so it
Mhm.
it really became uh, almost like a guilty carve out.
Mhm.
um, how do you experience curiosity in your body? Because again, going back to the
Yeah,
running, there's always that physical nature, I think, in a lot of people who
yeah,
especially are using that. How
yeah.
does it work for you?
If I am close to being curious, my body's definitely tense. But when I'm open to it, I can feel like my gut just kind of smiles. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's like my whole body's just kind of happy and excited because it's just here to experience things, and not so much as to force things. And so it's really nice. Yeah, I think it just feels like a smile or a warm, sunny day kind of feeling.
Oh, I love that. That's so
Yeah.
cool. Um, so then the other question that I like to ask, if people are willing to share, is, like, is there some kind of a challenge that you're dealing with, that
Mm.
you're really having to pull on the curiosity to help you overcome that? And
Yeah,
how has it done? Maybe you're already past it.
no, I don't think I'm past all the things, that's for sure. But I would say, circling back to the no budging piece, I'm still working on that. And one, I have to first trust that what I know to be my needs are real. And I'm not lying to myself when I say I'm tired or I'm hungry or I really can't do this thing or whatever it is. It's very hard not to budge on it because, exactly like you said earlier, we think that if we don't do this thing, the world's going to end, people are going to stop wanting to be around us. No one's going to want to call me anymore. No one's going to pass me referrals. I mean, that's where the brain goes. And so right now I'm really looking and trying to figure out, what does it mean to be curious about living a life where I am the most important person in my life, and trusting that when I take the best care of myself, I'll be taking the best care of everybody. Um, and I have not reached the other side, but I'm in the journey and I'm in the process, and it's becoming increasingly easier. But it's still terrifying and so scary. Um, but it's going well, and I'm sleeping better. All these small things. I don't even know why I said that. Sleep is just so, I haven't slept good in so many years, so it's nice. Um, yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. And it's difficult work, but it's
Yeah.
turning out to be worth it.
You know, you're you, feng shui, I often people call me in strictly because they're not sleeping well. And so,
Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Because, so for example, one of the things that I always ask before I ever step foot is like, okay, do you have stuff stored under your bed?
oh, interesting.
Do you have stuff stored under your bed? I'm asking you right now.
I do not, no.
Okay, good.
But I
Because
used to, and now that I moved last week and I'm sleeping better now. So is that why?
it's good part of it, yeah. The
Wow.
reason why is when you store things under your bed, the energy of whatever that is kind of like filters up and impacts you.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my clients very early on. I mean, I've been doing this 21 years, but
Mhm.
very early on, I had a friend who had me come over, and I'm like looking around, going, "What is this big white thing under your bed?" And
Yeah.
it had been a plaster cast that someone had made of her, like in one of the like a college sculpture class or whatever. And so it's this nude of her, but like just the torso.
Yeah.
And so I said, you need to pull that out because you don't want anything under your bed. You want everything to flow nicely. You need air to breathe in order to sleep well. Um, and she'd been having a lot of trouble with one of her hips, like her right hip. When she pulled the plaster cast out of from under her bed, that entire right hip on that cast had been crushed.
Wow.
She
That's a
pulled it out.
story.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
she pulled it out. She had it repaired, and her hip got better. I mean, she still had to go see like a physical therapist and stuff like that. But she had been doing that for years with no results, and then this happened. I was like, "All right,
Wow.
cook me, I'm done," because that
Yeah.
but yeah,
What
it
a
is, it's a big
story.
thing. It's so fascinating, and I'm sure when you're organizing things, there are
Mhm.
going to be all kinds of coincidences that happen as well, because
Yeah,
it may be not, called feng shui, but you're still working with the energy, you're still moving things
totally.
around. So have there been any cool stories like that that have happened in your
Yeah,
experiences?
I wouldn't say they're always energy related, but I think that there's a domino effect. One of my favorite ones that came to mind is I was helping a girl clean out her closet and I was noticing all these items with tags. And I was like, I want to talk about them, what's going on. And she goes, these are all gifts from my aunt. And I go, well, do you like any of them? Have you talked to your aunt about this? I bet we got rid of almost 4 trash bags of unwanted gifts,
What?
and it was a lot of gifts. And the best part was we got to talk about boundaries, and it wasn't anything new that she didn't already know herself, but she needed a third party to give her permission and say, "Hey, you don't have to keep this stuff." Your aunt's happiness, like her desire to do X, Y, and Z, it's not your burden to bear anymore. And it was all happening along the same time as her wedding. And I checked in, followed up with her to see how things were going, just with her closet. And she said, I spoke to my aunt, and because of you helping me set boundaries with my closet and set boundaries with unwanted gifts, I was able to set boundaries with her about what I actually wanted for my wedding. And
Uh,
I thought to myself, well, that's pretty cool. That's kind of a big deal. And I loved that. And I thought it was awesome because she had lost her mom. So her aunt was her mom, to give some context here.
mm.
There was a lot of history and in depth to this experience. And so I was honored that I got to play a little role in that kind of thing. So that was a big one for sure.
That really is big because you're not only are you dealing with the boundaries, but there's the guilt that and
Hmm.
the grief of,
Hmm.
but this is my mom adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, mother-daughter relationships in general are
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
Um, without proper communication and the desire and willingness to be vulnerable with each other, like you
Yeah.
said at the very beginning, that's vulnerability, is such a strength,
Yeah.
because without it you can never really grow and learn.
Yeah.
And if people stay so rigid, they just miss out on the beauty of life.
Mhm.
in my opinion, and that's why I love travel. So it sounds like
Yeah.
you love to travel. If you could live in another city besides Austin, where
Ooh,
would you be? What part of the world would you be in?
that's a great question. Well, I haven't done a ton of traveling outside of the US, but I know that I love the mountains. I like the ruggedness, the grittiness. Um, so I one time I actually did a course. Do you know what Knowles is? Maybe I told you about that. I'm not sure.
Knowles.
National Outdoor Leadership School. I lived
Oh,
outside in the Rockies for 90 days,
what?
and it was wild. But I kind of loved it. And so just in the mountains with a dog and a horse and a little cabin where I make cinnamon rolls. That's what I would want. Yeah. Be perfect.
Wow. Now, did you I'm trying to remember because when we first started talking, did you
Mhm.
also say that you had been a river rafting guide?
Yes, yes, I did say that. That
Okay.
was outside of Taos in New Mexico. I did
Okay.
that a couple summers. So I love being outside. Adventure and connecting to nature is a big thing for me. So yeah, just living with not a lot of stuff in the trees is perfect.
Well, now I can understand more why being organized and living well, but living minimally,
Mhm.
allows for that level of freedom.
Yes, I always tell people freedom is when you find the restrictions that serve you best. Because when you say
I'm sorry,
yes to
say that one more time.
okay, let
Freedom
me
is
see if it freedom is when you find the restrictions that serve you best.
Oh, I love that.
That's what I think about when I think of freedom. Because if I that's kind of the no budging thing. You know, what does it mean to be free? That's kind of a, big answer, big question. What does that really mean? And it's essentially asking yourself, who are you? Because you're only really free when you live a life that's authentic to you. And so by learning what you're going to say no to, that's kind of if that all pieces together, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Well, there is that power of no,
Yeah.
and giving yourself permission to use that complete sentence.
Mhm.
Again, that was not something that came naturally for me and is still challenging because on the Enneagram, I am a 9. I'm a peacemaker. I just
Oh,
want everybody to be
interesting.
happy.
Okay.
But
I'm
I
an
have a
8.
strong 8. Yeah, well, see, and I have a strong
Okay.
8 wing, which is why I enjoy telling people what to do and where to put things.
Then it works out good.
Yeah, but, so clearly if your primary is an 8, you also have really learned how to, um, communicate in ways that are clear, that are
Mhm.
direct, but that are also kind, and I know that
Yeah.
some 8s forget the kindness part.
Yes, they do. Sometimes I forget it for myself. But no, that's
Yeah.
funny. And I bet that the 9 side of the harmony serves you really well in your feng shui work too, to be able to see harmony of spaces. So it's
Yeah.
funny how it all goes together.
Well, and then in the Chinese astrology, the year of this I'm a snake. So this is actually my,
Oh,
solar return. I mean, it's
cool.
this 60-year cycle and that energy is very intuitive.
Mm,
And so it's like, "Oh, well, of course I can see why this needs to go here and why this over here is,
yeah.
providing, some angst for you and nobody else is picking
Yeah.
that up." But
Yeah.
it is what
Cool.
it we all have our little special gifts
Yes.
and understanding those and honoring them and honoring the no's as well as the yeses are all really big things that help us to hone our sense of curiosity. Because sometimes the
Mm,
curiosity is, I wonder if my life would be different like this, and
mhm,
sometimes it is, I just need to know this. I
mhm,
don't know why I need to know this yet, but this
mhm.
information is going to be coming in really handy. And sometimes that is okay. What was it? The people called it being a seminar junkie.
Mm,
Where
mhm,
you're just constantly learning, but never
mhm,
implementing. Um,
mhm.
do you have people who have that, or you've suggested these solutions and they just don't follow through with them?
Hmm. Not often. Most of the time, when people are at the point where they're willing to pay me money, they want to take it pretty seriously. And I like to think that I set up systems that are so easy to maintain that it works for them.
Good.
And that's been my experience. But I would say, it just depends on how ready they are. Back to what I said earlier, of if they're still not quite at that implementation phase, then that's okay. And I do teach organizing classes sometimes, and so I've probably met them at an organizing class versus at a session. And I think they're just on a journey of hearing that over and over again, and maybe
Okay.
it's on the 30th time of hearing it that they'll be ready to make that actual change. I don't know, but that's been my
Okay.
experience.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're teaching organizing classes. How else can people contact you? What would be the best first step for connecting with you?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. You can go to my website, bluebirdorganizing.net. It has all my contact information on there. You can schedule your free in-person consultation if you want, where you can actually meet me and maybe feel a little less scary. You can ask your specific questions. And really, the hardest part about getting organized in a lot of ways is opening that door and letting someone into your space. And so, kind of breaching that subject first can make it a lot easier, and people tend to feel a lot more comfortable. But yeah, go to my website, bluebirdorganizing.net. And if you can't find me there, my Instagram is Bluebird Organizing. My Facebook is Bluebird Organizing. You should
As it
find it
should be.
at Bluebird Organizing, and you'll find all the information you need.
So since not everybody who's going to be listening to this is here in Austin,
Mhm.
do you have other people that you refer to outside of this general area, or is there like maybe one or two things for when people are looking for an organizer that they should look for or look out for,
Yeah,
um,
so
positive and
number
negative?
one is I would search up the National Association of Organizing and Productivity Professionals. An acronym is NAPO. They have a directory on there, and you can have it be tailored to your location. And so you'll be able to find a professional organizer. And more often than not, if an organizer has gone through the trouble and price of being a part of NAPO, they're probably on the better end of organizers. Um, but still vet people and understand that there's also a connection that has to take place. And if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. Don't let that deter you from looking for another organizer. And then the other thing I would say, goods and bads. Goods are, do you feel connected? Have they given you some sort of tangible plan or step as to what's going to happen? And do they understand that organizing is not just about tidying your space, but really creating systems that allow you to maintain the flow that comes into your space? Those would be things to look for. No's would be people who try to rush you, um, people who are not really going to listen to your needs and desires, and people who are maybe just going to try and do a cookie cutter approach and buy all the organizing products imaginable, but not actually get you organized.
Okay, those are excellent, excellent checklists to go through
Yeah.
when somebody is considering that. Because honestly, sometimes for me, I really can organize well.
Yeah.
But because of the ADHD that really has flared later on in life,
Mhm.
it's amazing how protective all of those hormones are from and helping you switch tasks quickly. When they go away, it's like, oh no, I don't get to do all that now. Sometimes I just need body doubling. I just,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure that people hire you for that as well. But at the same time, yeah. Anyway, this has been absolutely delightful. We are coming up on
Yeah.
the end of our time here. Perry, I know we're gonna have all of the ways of contacting Perry in the show notes so that we can make your life as organized and
Yeah.
streamlined as possible so that you too can be the master or mistress of your reality, where you get to know where your boundaries are and what things you're not going to budge on, and look fabulous while doing it. So, Perry,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining me on this, and I look forward to hearing from anybody who's used your services how amazing you are.
Thank you. Well, that is very nice of you, and thank you for having me on, and I'm excited to help anybody who's ready.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Have an on until next time. This
Yeah.
is this is the Curiosity Solution. Bye bye.